Hello, everybody. Welcome to CC World, a podcast by Global Spark where we engage in conversations with global experts about cutting edge solutions to our world's most pressing problems using interdisciplinary problem solving, creativity, and collaboration. I'm your host and producer, Atharv Agrawal, a second year Pearson Scholar at the University of Toronto, studying economics, data analytics, and peace, conflict, and justice. In this introductory episode, I will give you an overview of Global Spark and CC World and have a conversation with Malik Ismail, the founder of Global Spark, on how he turned an education initiative into an international nonprofit organization impacting 10,000 students around the world. Afterwards, our podcast hosts, Logan and Yuan, will share what you can expect from our bi weekly podcast episodes, as well as a sneak peek into what is coming in episode 1. First, let me introduce you to Global Spark. Global Spark is an education nonprofit that educates and mobilizes thousands of university students globally in STEM, social sciences, and business, in social entrepreneurship and global development. Now, the question arises, why did we at Global Spark want to create CC World? Students often believe that their career and social impact work are distinct and must choose which path to pursue. However, with the world becoming increasingly interdependent and connected, it is critical to prepare students to tackle the world's most pressing challenges from an interdisciplinary perspective and integrate this kind of thinking into their mindset. With CC World, we bring on experts, leaders, and innovators from around the world to share their perspectives and experiences on the importance of interdisciplinary problem solving and collaboration in tackling global challenges and how they interwove their careers together with social impact. These are real people committed to finding path-breaking and novel interventions to issues of global import through collaboration and creativity. Through CC World, we want to show that all our endeavors can be and must be undertaken with cognizance of the fact that humanity has to be the focal point of our undertakings. Today, we have the pleasure of having with us Malik Ismail. Malik is the founder and executive director of Global Spark. He was also a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group and recently joined the strategy team at Google X, Google's moonshot factory. Thank you so much for being with us here at CC World, Malik. We're really excited to talk to you today.
Thanks, Atharv. I'm really happy to be here.
You went through the quintessential university engineering experience at the University of Toronto, but something about your experience here made you feel the need to establish Global Spark. I'm curious to know what that was.
Yeah, so I started Global Spark in my last year of undergrad at U of T. And the idea for it really came from a couple of observations I had made throughout my undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto. The first observation was that the majority of the university curriculum really only focused on teaching students how to apply their skill sets to urban Canadian contexts, like Toronto. But most of the major pressing challenges that our society faces are beyond cities like Toronto. So they either be in Northern Canada, for example, or on other continents. And really solving those problems effectively requires a completely different approach to problem solving. Because the way you have to think about those problems are different. The constraints are different. The needs of the communities are different. You can't just take a solution that works in Toronto and drop it in Nairobi, for example, right? But most students weren't being taught about A, the challenges being faced beyond the context of cities like Toronto, or B, how to uniquely think about them. So that was really one source of inspiration. The second source was that I observed in my undergrad that several engineering students really only thought about the technical components of a solution. And to build a truly effective solution, one needs to obviously go beyond just the technical considerations, right? There was a specific moment where this really came to a head. So I was with Engineers Without Borders at the time, and I was running this mini case study that I was giving to hundreds of students at lunch one day. And the case, of course, was purely hypothetical, but the premise of it essentially was that there was this village in Ghana that was separated from the main highway by a river, right? And the village wanted access to the highway so they could access trade. And improve the overall socioeconomics of the town. Um, but the challenge here was that the bridge that was being proposed would run through existing farmland at the village. And so the question we asked the students was, as you think about building this bridge, what are all of the factors you'd consider? And most students said, well, we think about the structural integrity of the bridge, right? And they went on to list the technical analysis that they would do. But very few of them, like I would say under 5%, actually mentioned the non-technical factors you'd have to consider, right? So like, who would finance the bridge? Who would be the partners in building the bridge, right? Would this be something that would be commissioned by the government, by international organizations? How easy is it to source the materials for the bridge? What are the unique needs of the village, right, and their transportation styles? And so there seemed to just be this gap between how you take a solution that's very technically sound and really translate it into something that's practical for the community that it's being designed for, right? And so when I started Global Spark, it was really to address these two gaps. The first was teaching engineering students about how they could apply the skill sets that they were learning in all of their courses and all of their experiences outside of the classroom to really tackle pressing global challenges like climate change or global health. The second was teaching them how to be multidisciplinary problem solvers that could go beyond the traditional four walls of technical analysis when trying to solve a problem and really build something that was sustainable and really impactful for the community it was being designed for. And so that was the intent of Global Spark, right? And then as I thought about it, really and reflected on my own undergraduate experience, I came to realize that students learn best when they're engaged both inside and outside of the classroom, right? When you're taking learnings from both of those settings, you're really compounding the overall learning of the student. And so the way that Global Spark was designed was to then engage students in both of those settings with learning experiences that address those two goals I just talked about to really provide this broader learning experience for them so that they could take these skill sets and really apply them, right? And so that was how Global Spark was started.
That is fascinating. As somebody who studied the empirical sciences throughout high school, but was given the chance to explore the social sciences in university, I realized everything I was missing out on, which is why I truly believe in Global Spark's mission myself. Given all the time you've spent on Global Spark, I'm curious as to how your professional career has been shaped by your experiences at Global Spark.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I wanted to do, I guess, was really be this embodiment of this multidisciplinary thinking I was preaching, right? And so what I loved about engineering was this rigorous problem-solving approach you could take to solve challenges around the world. And what I wanted to do was apply this rigorous approach to some of the most difficult and important strategic challenges facing either entire companies or even industries around the world. And so ultimately, that's what led me into consulting, was the ability to couple this rigorous problem-solving approach with these really pertinent, pressing strategic problems. And so while at BCG, what I've done is primarily focus then on helping CEOs and leaders of some of the biggest companies around the world tackle some of these large and pressing challenges that our world is facing, most notably around climate change and financial empowerment. And what's interesting is over the past couple of years especially, what I've seen is that these companies and these leaders are getting more and more proactive around solving these social challenges like climate change and thinking about the various downstream effects of them. And the question that these CEOs are constantly now asking themselves is, how do we innovate, and get our entire employee base of 20, 30, 40,000 people to innovate solutions around social impact? How do we create a culture of innovation where, as a company, we're really pushing the boundaries of how we think about topics like climate change, and truly embed that into the daily thinking that our organization does. And, instead of the traditional approach, which has been social impact being kind of a back of the hallway, CSR only function, right? These companies are now thinking about, how do I really embed social impact into the core way that my companies operate? And so this type of approach that these business leaders are now taking around the world has actually really reinforced what we're doing at Global Spark, which is getting students, this next generation of the workforce and leaders in the world, to think about how they can apply their skills on a day-to-day basis to solving these global problems. And so I think that this experience at BCG, in a way, really goes hand in hand with what we've been doing at Global Spark, which is really exciting, right? Because we're helping to prepare this next generation of the workforce and those who will eventually lead the companies to think in the way that these companies are moving. And that in and of itself then has shaped how I've thought about my career, which is that I ultimately also want to be at the forefront of leading a business in tackling one of these pressing challenges. Right now, that focus for me is climate change, and it's what ultimately led me to X.
In all your time with Global Spark, were there any moments where you felt like you had made real progress on Global Spark's mission?
Yeah, so the example that really pops to mind here is with Hack the Globe, which is the first of its kind multidisciplinary social impact hackathon that we started with Global Spark a couple of years ago. And for those of you who are listening who aren't as familiar with hackathons, essentially the premise is you bring together really bright university students for a 24 or 48-hour period. You give them a problem prompt, they build something, they ideate, and over the duration of that period, they end up building a minimum viable product or MVP for some really cool technical solution. And in most cases, the experience ends there. What we wanted to do, though, was to completely redefine the experience of a hackathon. Because what we found was that within the 24 to 48-hour period that most hackathons have, it's really hard for students to have enough time to think through a solution that is extremely thoughtful and deeply impactful based on the prompt that they were trying to solve, just because there is a very limited amount of time to do so. And, on top of that, we found that most hackathons, although they focused on really interesting, innovative technical solutions, the majority of them didn't actually have students solving or building solutions to some of the most pressing challenges that our world is facing today, like climate change or global health. And so what we wanted to do with Hack the Globe was to create a unique, first of its kind experience that would enable students to apply their skill set to developing really novel solutions to some of these global problems, but B, give them the time and guidance necessary to actually build more thoughtful, more impactful solutions that they can then take beyond the duration of the hackathon, right? And so what we ended up doing was creating this 2-week long event instead of a 48-hour event, where students could actually get access to experts from around the world, from business, like from companies like BCG, from NGOs like the Gates Foundation, from tech companies like Google, and actually have the support system needed to really build these deeper, more impactful solutions. And on top of that, what we did was we also partnered with incubators and venture capital firms so that students could have the option to take their solutions forward, and they would have the platform and the support system needed to do so. And so I think that this was one way that we really, really, really innovated as an organization. And, as I reflect back on this experience, especially the first one that we ran, one of the moments that really stands out is that there were some students who in their feedback actually said that, this hackathon forced us to think differently and opened up different ways of thinking and applying our skills that we hadn't previously considered in our careers or in our undergrad. And I think that this in and of itself really hit the goal of what we were trying to do with that event.
Coming to being forced to think differently, Google X is probably the place that is the first thing that comes to my mind, at least, when I think of being forced to think differently. So I'm curious to hear how that shift happened and what your work over there looks like. If you can share, of course, because I know that they're fairly secretive in the way they work.
Yeah, so there's not too much that I can say about what I'll be working on. Uh, but I'd say that there were three main factors that attracted me to X and kind of was the next logical step in my career, right? The first is just the types of problem that X works on, right? X is really trying to solve the biggest challenges facing humanity that impact billions of people around the world. And for me personally, as we've talked about in this conversation, what's been really important has been to find roles that are at the intersection of innovation and business with social impact, right? And X as an organization is the perfect embodiment of that. So from a mission perspective, it was an organization that just really resonated with me. The second reason was just the approach that X takes to then solving these problems, right? This whole notion of how do we fundamentally rethink these problems and build solutions that are going to drive 10 times the impact as opposed to an incremental 10% impact. And so it's just the way of thinking and the problem-solving approach that X takes and the way they use innovation and the latest and greatest in technology to solve some of these pressing challenges was something that was just really interesting and something I wanted to get more exposure to, right? And so that was kind of the second reason. And then the third was around the specific problem space that I'm going to be working on. So as I mentioned, I've been primarily focused at BCG and of course in my undergrad as well on helping to address the problem of climate change and using cutting edge technology to do so. And the space that I'll be playing in at X will be around climate change. And so it's also just a problem space I'm personally really passionate about. So I'd say those three reasons that led me to X in this new role.
That sounds like a really exciting role, and I wish you all the best with that new journey. Speaking of increased impact and new journeys, I'm curious to know if you have any thoughts before we part ways on where you envision Global Spark to go next, given everything that it has already achieved in its time.
Yeah, no, I think that Global Spark is still in its infancy. I think that there's a lot of potential for what we're trying to do here, which is really exciting. I think where we've started to go this past year and where we're hoping to continue going over the coming years is to make it truly global. So when I started Global Spark and over the first 3 to 4 years of its existence, we primarily focused on Canada. This past year, with the hackathon, with all of the curriculum work that we're doing and university partnerships that we have, we've expanded globally. And so I'm looking to continue doing that over the next few years. And a lot of really passionate young leaders as part of the organization who are really looking to continue spearheading that effort. And so excited to see where it goes.
That sounds very exciting. And I too, having now been a part of Global Spark for nearly a year now, I'm excited to see where this goes. Thank you so much, Malik, again for taking the time out to speak with us. It's been such a pleasure talking to you and getting to know more about Global Spark, your career, and everything that lies ahead of us.
Yeah, no, my pleasure being here and excited for your next episode.
I shall now pass it on to Logan.
Thanks, Atharv. My name is Logan Keeler, and I'm a host for CC World and a second-year student at the University of Western Ontario studying business management. Every episode of CC World shall bring you a new personality from an array of inspirational individuals, from high-profile names in the world of industry and academia to those at the helm of grassroots organizations like startups and nonprofits. Each episode, lasting 45 to 50 minutes, will be an organically flowing and candid conversation between our guests and hosts. We hope to bring a new episode to you every 2 weeks. There are fascinating individuals out there in the world engaged in inspiring work, and so we're also eager to know who you want to see on CC World. If there's anyone you'd like to hear from or have us interview, please let us know. On to you now, Hui-Wen.
Thanks, Logan. My name is Hui-Wen, and I'm a host for CC World and a fourth-year student at the University of Toronto studying peace, conflict and justice, and contemporary Asian studies. We're excited to embark on this journey with all of you. Technological innovation is fascinating because of its many possibilities and potential to drive growth and development. With digital tools such as mobile phones, solar panels, and drones becoming increasingly available, existing technologies are finding new applications and new technologies are constantly being created to address new challenges. However, technology is, after all, just a tool. Therefore, it must be seen not as an end, but as a means to something far greater, behind the creative and daring minds of innovators and impact-driven students, like many of our listeners. In our very first episode, I, Hui-Wen, speak to Vera Balzakoska, the Director of Programs at Alula, a Toronto-based startup that harnesses the power of accessible technologies such as simple mobile phones as a means to further the human rights of workers across the world. Stay tuned for the full episode to learn more about their work and the positive impact that ensues when technologists and activists collaborate to address global challenges. But if you can't be there for the conversation, don't worry about missing out. We'll CC you on it.
The CC World podcast is produced and edited by Maurice Wong and Atharv Agarwal. Content creation is undertaken by Hui-Wen Zhang, Logan Keeler, and Annie Zhu. And the music is created by Jen Zapluza. You can find more CC World episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, remember to follow us on social media at Global Spark to get updates on future events and content. And visit our website at globalspark.world for more information. Once again, thanks for listening to CC World, and we'll see you on the next episode.